Now, for more on this UN emission report, let's speak to Dr. Alexandre Koberle, a research associate at the Grentham Institute at Imperial College in London. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Now, we've just been through the list of, well, some of the main points of the report, and it seems very grim, very depressing. What are your thoughts?
Well, yes, emissions are rising again. They stayed flat, relatively flat for 2014 through 2016, but they started rising again in 2017. And that's not very good news. The good news is that there are current efforts already underway to curb emissions. And the current efforts mean that about 15% of greenhouse gas emissions are under some kind of a carbon pricing scheme. And if China launches its emissions trading scheme like it has announced, that'll mean 20% are under. However, this is still falling very short of the targets that we need to reach by 2030. Okay. So we need, as you said, we need to treble or even 5 times more of the effort than has been happening already.
Okay, and from what I understand, this report really concludes that nations, that they must keep their word, their commitments, and the big next meeting is in Paris, not in Paris, about Paris, is being held in Poland, COP24 in Poland on December the 3rd. What needs to happen there by all those nations that will be attending?
Well, the meeting will start on December the 3rd. It's a 2-week meeting. The first week is when the technical staff of the delegations meet and try to start a conversation, a dialogue, negotiations. And then on the second week is when the heads of state come in, and then the real political agreements can start happening. Yes, there needs to be what is called a ratcheting up of the announced efforts already. And that is something that is foreseen in the Paris Agreement. This was the idea that nations would first commit to a certain level of emissions cut. That's the nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, and that's what they did in the past. And with an idea that every 5 years these get revised, and the idea is that you ratchet up your efforts. So it means that progressively we start raising our ambition. That is what the Paris Agreement has as its main effort improvement process.
Okay, and I want to ask you, because we've seen here that emissions are rising and they were doing well. Tell us, who is not pulling their weight, and is the Paris Agreement binding?
Well, the Paris Agreement is binding, but it leaves to the countries to determine how much effort they're going to put in. And since there is no global policing entity, it's hard to enforce that, except that you can do this naming and shaming kind of process, or just that people will, the different nations will actually join in with the effort just to be part of the global community. And also this, we have to remember, this will affect us all. So eventually, everybody is going to pay a price of inaction. So what is called the Talanoa dialogue, which is happening right now, is an open dialogue where options are being put on the table, and different nations are going to start proposing what else they can do. And this is what is going to be happening in Poland in the next couple of weeks.
I want to jump in and ask.
Hopefully there'll be more effort there.
But okay, that sounds like a very good initiative, but will that be strong enough? Because you talk there about naming and shaming, but I mean, you're there in London. There seems to be no urgency with anything with regards to climate change. I mean, just as an example, if there was the same amount of energy put into what we see with Brexit, put into climate change, we wouldn't be getting these sort of reports that we do today. Would you agree? Yeah.
Sure, and that is a global issue. Although we have to remember that climate change is problematic because humans are not necessarily, we haven't evolved through our history to be able to deal with problems that go beyond our lifetime and beyond even our grandchildren's lifetime. We're only able to cope with problems that are maybe one generation in the future and something that is maybe in our country. So when we have to look at something that spans 2 or 3 generations to a problem that's going to really start hitting home maybe 10 years, 15 years from now, and it's a global effort, then it becomes very difficult. So it is very challenging. Obviously, it's probably the biggest challenge we have ever faced as a race, as a species. And it's, with all the differences, I mean, we're looking at what's happening in France. President Macron tried to raise taxes to curb fossil fuel use, and he's met with widespread protests that also are tied to other things. It's not just climate, but it is a complicated communication problem. And I think that what needs to start happening is that the problem starts being communicated better. Okay. But there's a lot of noise in the system, and I don't know. It's not simple. It's definitely a complicated equation.
On that note, Dr. Alexandre, we thank you very much for your time. That was Dr. Alexandre Koberle, a research associate from Imperial College in London, from the Grantham Institute. Thank you.